So this evening is called How the Buddha Speaks. And this brings out the point that the Buddha would have naturally, as an enlightened being, spoken truthfully, kindly, helpfully, and harmoniously. And what we're doing when we practice the precepts is training ourselves to speak more naturally along these skillful lines, so that eventually we too can communicate like a Buddha. So there's lots of wonderful stories from the Pali Canon, which is the written record of the Buddha and his teaching. And a lot of it involves stories of the Buddha meeting people and communicating in ways which really touched people's hearts in fresh and remarkable ways. So there's many stories of people who are spiritually troubled. They can't make out which teacher to follow or how to make sense of the different philosophical or spiritual views which were around at the time, such as whether actions have consequences or not, whether it's a good idea to sacrifice lots of animals at a feast, whether girl children are worth as much as boy children, whether it's possible to uncover the nature of reality through love or wisdom, and so on. Now they get talking with the Buddha as he's traveling around northern India and put their questions. And somehow, in his wise and compassionate way, the Buddha manages, with a bit of direct teaching from him quite often, to get them to think things out for themselves and to identify for themselves what behaviors of body, speech, or mind are in fact skillful and which are in accord with the highest truths, the deepest love, which is how things really are. So people discover that, yes, actions do have consequences, and we can lessen our own and others' suffering by exploring our actions of body, speech, and mind and learning how to be more skillful over time. And they say that a true sacrifice, a Dharma sacrifice, doesn't involve animals. It involves transforming ourselves more and more in the direction of love and wisdom. And they learn that the true worth of a person is not dependent on or related to their gender, caste, level of wealth, physical prowess, beauty, and so on. It's related to the extent that they've worked on themselves and molded their being in the direction of skillful ethics and the direction of awareness, generosity, contentment, and so on. So the Buddha can do this because, in a way, we do all know from my own experience what is naturally ethical: to be kind, to be generous, to be aware, to not harm, and so on. And when the people have finished talking with the Buddha and they come to realize themselves the answers to their troubling questions, they often burst out spontaneously with something like, "Marvelous, Venerable Sir, marvelous, Venerable Sir," as if a person were to turn face upwards what is upside down, or to uncover the concealed, or to point the way to one who is lost, or to carry a lamp in the darkness, thinking, "Those who have eyes will see visible objects." So has the Dharma been set forth in many ways by the Buddha. And then, because they've been so impressed and inspired by what the Buddha has said, and by the open, free, and compassionate way he's communicated with them, they often then go on to say, "We go to the Buddha for refuge, to the Dharma for refuge, and to the Sangha for refuge. May the Buddha regard us as followers who have gone for refuge for life from today." So communication at its best, at its highest or its deepest, communication as a Buddha communicates, is a medium for conveying the way things really are, a medium for revealing reality, a medium for helping people explore how to move forward in their spiritual lives. And we can participate in this lovely area of communication by exploring the 4 speech precepts or communication precepts and learning about how to bring them more fully into our own daily lives. So yes, I say we used to say in Triratna, when we were saying the precepts or chanting them in Pali and then saying them in English, we used to say truthful speech. We're going to practice truthful speech. We're going to practice kindly speech and so on. But it got changed by Bhante Sangretna, our founder, some years ago, to say truthful communication. We try and practice truthful communication, kindly communication. And Well, I mean, I think you can just think yourselves, or maybe people can just say the vast range of types of communication that we engage in. How many emails have you sent today? Well, I work as a social worker, and I can tell you a lot of communication is through email. So anybody else got another thing to spoken speech communicating that you've done today? WhatsApp, okay, WhatsApp. Maybe sent a picture as well. Anybody else? Text, yeah, so it's written speech, isn't it? Yeah.
Phone call?
Pardon?
A phone call?
A phone call, yeah, yeah. If anybody's got anything on the Zoom, just, you know, put it in the chat or something like that. Yashadalka was about to say something. Oh, no, okay. But also gestures, you know, the raised eyebrow, or I don't know, be hugging a person. There's many ways of communicating by gesture, aren't there, and body language. Also, maybe there's a kind of mind-to-mind communication that goes on in silence. For instance, I think most of us possibly have had an experience of walking into a room where people have been arguing, and you feel that atmosphere. They're not actually arguing at that minute. Maybe they're not even sort of doing a body language thing. Just come back to you. But, you know, you sort of feel that communication that's there of anger. And Vinay's got something from the chat.
Yeah, so Colin is saying a facial expression.
Facial expression, yeah, very much, yeah, huge amount of body language is through our face, isn't it? Thank you. Also, lots of people come to the centre, and when they come in and they go into one of the shrine rooms, or meditation rooms, they often say, oh, what a lovely atmosphere, because they pick up something. Nobody's there at that minute meditating, but there's something sort of there. So it's communication in that kind of way. And sometimes we have communication in silence. Well, in Triratna, we have a practice of silence. Luckily in Triratna, I'd certainly never get on if we had a huge practice of silence, because I like talking a lot. But we do have a practice of silence, especially if we go on retreat. You know, you might well have silence from after the evening activities. So, for instance, around a breakfast, or sometimes even lunch. If you go on a longer retreat, maybe even a few days in silence. You know, that's quite a practice. Silence can communicate quite a lot. I know for me, I was brought up in a family where there was a lot of suppressed, well, it wasn't necessarily suppressed. Sometimes it was suppressed tension and anger and so on. And then, you know, especially at meal times, there'd be this tense silence. Silence meant, you know, something dreadful. And then at some point there'd be a screaming argument between my mum and my dad. So silence communicated quite a lot. Not very pleasant thing. Anyway, the point is that sort of ultimately, in a way, communication, be it through written speech, spoken speech, like text, phone calls, gestures and so on, really in a way it's with our minds. We are working with our minds. That's true of all the precepts. But we're looking particularly at how, in a way, our minds sort of express themselves in different kinds of outward communication. So, first of all, we undertake to abstain from false communication, and we practice truthful communication. So, not engaging in false speech, well, we can probably think of some obvious ones like deliberate lying, but there are some other more subtle forms. Can anybody just think of a sort of more subtle form that is false communication but isn't deliberate lying? Again, anybody in the chat, feel free.
When someone says, how are you? You just say, I'm fine.
So you're not really communicating genuinely how you are. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, anybody else?
Exaggerating or minimizing?
Exaggerating. When I said, I can't remember, I think I said something, I've been trying to practice this today, but it's been hopeless, it goes out the window. You know, I've had millions of emails or something. I have not had millions of emails. I might have had many, but it's an exaggeration. Why? Why do I say that? Is it to get a bit of sympathy from the person I'm saying it to? Any chat going on there?
Not yet.
Not yet, no, okay. All right, we've got a few ideas. So what do they say? Lying by omission and commission. I can never get that right. You cannot tell the truth by not actually giving information, is it? Not actually saying. Exaggerating, we've talked about that. Jargon, maybe, which sort of disguises the truth and doesn't communicate sort of in a way that other people can understand. So obviously we can discuss these in groups later on if we want to, but why do we lie, or why do we exaggerate, maximize or minimize, whatever we're doing? Well, I do think usually we're doing it when we want something and we're trying to meet our needs, but we can't sort of do it in an honest way, or we don't believe that we can do that in an honest way. And also maybe we're trying to avoid getting into trouble with someone, such as our partner, boss, or friend. So with all the precepts, we find that the actions which are not skillful, so some kind of false speech, basically they have self-seeking in them, and they're not really concerned genuinely with promoting our own or other people's welfare. Now, picking up on a bit more, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Julia, I'm sorry. Something that Julia said, Bhante Sangharakshita has written about this, so accuracy is important. As I said, why would I say I've done millions of emails just because somebody can pat me on the head or something and say they're there, or something like that. But there's sort of deeper levels. It's about communication being genuine and authentic and actually revealing of ourselves. So being honest, saying what we really think and feel. Well, to do that, we actually need to know ourselves enough to know what we think and feel and want and so on. And that requires quite a degree of self-awareness and clarity of mind. And also, then, there's an environmental aspect, because if we've got friends that can't receive the truth, if you see what I mean, actually that's not going to work either. So if we're only around people who sort of want us to say, if they ask us, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. And maybe wouldn't be able to hold us saying, well, actually it's been a very difficult time at the moment due to something. Do you see what I mean? So there's sort of two aspects to that. We need to know ourselves and also be prepared to share, but also we need to have a look at the context in which we're communicating in. Sometimes, of course, it can be a really big thing that people find coming into the Sangha, that maybe they develop relationships that they can really sort of express themselves fully. So the second thing that we do is undertake to abstain from harsh speech, and we try and practice kindly, friendly, and affectionate speech and communication. Not that. So what we're getting at here is that this kind of communication has a foundation of metta. We've all done the metta bhavana, haven't we, one way or another? A foundation of loving kindness. So there needs to be a strong, healthy, kindly concern for the welfare of ourselves and the other person or people that we're communicating with. So for this to come about, we do really need to be aware of the other person, or maybe it's an animal, awareness of them as a living being with their own needs, wishes, and so on. And it's only in this way we're going to avoid sort of putting our own projections onto that other person or other being, and then only be concerned with our own needs. Now, we haven't got time to do this, but very often, if we were doing an event in Triratna that was about communication, we would, at this moment, perhaps, go into doing the communication exercise, which Bhante learned from somebody in India, I think many, many years ago, which we do still do. And the first part of that exercise, which unfortunately we haven't got time to do, we just sit opposite a partner and we look at each other. We just look. We're aware of each other, in other words. Actually, there's two aspects of that, which is really highlighted in, well, not just kindly communication, any kind of communication, because there's looking in a sort of, not staring at someone. It's really just taking them in. But there's also a very receptive attitude to that, because actually the other person is being aware of you. So one does need to be prepared to be a person that the other person is being aware of. Need to be prepared to be looked at, you see what I mean, and taken in. So it's something I remember being very, very disconcerted when I came to Manchester Buddhist Centre in 1983, because all these people in the Sangha were sort of looking at me much more than was normal. I thought they were on drugs. I'm not joking. Took me a little while to realise that people are just sort of looking in this kindly way. And it's, you know, in a way, it's not the only thing that's involved, but obviously without looking and being aware, we're never going to really sort of experience that other being as another being and maybe kind of relate to what their actual needs are. So 1 or 2 examples of harsh speech. Anybody do shout out, though shout out in a kindly way, not a harsh one. Right. 1 or 2 examples. Harsh speech. What would you feel might be harsh speech? Harsh with this sort of unloving tone.
Swearing.
Swearing. Yeah. Why do we swear? Well, possibly because we can't sort of express ourselves in other ways. But yeah, actually Bantu was quite keen on that being seen as harsh speech. Though some people might disagree because it might be sort of, I don't know, cultural or normal. But yeah. Anybody else?
Making very general judgments about people.
Yeah,
Like
sort of
saying
negative
you're being
judgment.
very inconsiderate or something like that. That would be it.
Okay, yeah, right, okay, yep. Got a Zoom one.
One from Zoom is defensiveness. Does that come out?
How would that, as hello person, how would that come out as harsh communication?
She's saying now reacting.
Reacting, so you're defensive inside and then you react in some sort of negative way, maybe being a bit harsh to the other person in some way. Okay, excellent, yep.
Colin is saying PMQ. I don't know what that.
PMQ, anybody? Yes, yes. A few other examples, patronizing comments, disrespectful comments, putting somebody down, backbiting, gossip, speaking loud and fast, being cynical, talking at the person. Anyway, these are just some examples. What about kindly communication? Well, just a couple of thoughts about some examples of kindly communication. The sort of, it's a bit like the outer expressions of that feeling of metta.
Could be just like listening to someone really carefully.
Listening to someone really carefully, yeah, that's really being aware of them, isn't it? Really listening to what they're saying, yeah. So another side could be not interrupting them, isn't it? I don't know about you, but I'm terrible at that. Always trying to get my bit in before, you know, whatever. So yeah, thank you, that's excellent. From the Zoom?
Yeah, listening from Zoom as well.
Yeah, listening.
Listening as well, yes, excellent. Yeah, that's sort of in a way a kindly way of communicating par excellence. Anybody else?
What about being, you know, honest when you feel you've drifted off and you might say, I'm really sorry, I wasn't listening. Tell me again, I do want to listen to you. So kind of pulling back in speech when you realise you've drifted off and being kind enough to bring that into the conversation. Yeah, so there's an honesty and truthfulness, isn't it? But also you're, being kind with that. Yeah, and kind to yourself as well, isn't it? Because basically we do drift off sometimes, don't we? So yeah, lovely example. Anybody else?
There's one more from Zoom.
Yeah.
Sorry. Peter is saying expressing empathy, and then one is saying making time available.
Yeah.
Aaron is saying asking about their well-being. Yeah.
Lovely. All excellent comments there. Yeah. 1 or 2 others maybe sort of making that's what I was going to say, genuine appreciative comments, saying thank you, a sort of kind tone to your words and your body language. An interesting one that somebody must have put down at some point, knowing the importance of silence. Actually, silence can just arise naturally, can't it? So, you know, we can talk about what we like in the groups, but I know sometimes I talk with my Buddhist friends about how, you know, you get an email. It actually happened this week. So actually it was last week. No, it's this difficult situation had arisen with a patient, I'm mental health social worker. And anyway, I'm an inpatient social worker. I was in touch with the consultant in the community team. And then he wrote back this email. And my response was, he's rapped me on the knuckles. And I did a kind of slanderous speech thing, and I sort of in a way, because I told the inpatient doctor, anyway, Dr. Fred, let's call him, has rapped me on the knuckles. you know, probably because I wanted him to then say, oh, Jill, you know, I'm Jill in that context, poor old you or something anyway. But, it's quite, anyway, the thing is, it was quite a difficult situation, but when I reread that email, I did reply later on in a very friendly tone, I'm glad to say, thank you for your input and so forth. But when I reread it the next day, it didn't have that same sort of punch to it. Have you ever noticed that, people? Which is quite interesting, probably because I was in a better frame of mind anyway. But it would have been so easy to dash an email back. It would have been rather sort of, thank you, Dr. Fred, for your input. Do you know what I mean? So it's something that's quite interesting, maybe that, of course, it could come up in spoken communication, but I find it comes up in emails and things like that much more. Do you see what I mean? Like, how am I going to respond to what feels like a sort of bit of an attack in the email? Am I just going to give back as much as I feel I've got? Or maybe, you know, think about it, wait a bit, respond in a more kindly way. So the third precept is about abstaining from unhelpful, meaningless, useless communication. Not that any of us would engage in that, would we? And commit to developing helpful, meaningful, and useful communication. Well, what is it that makes our communication helpful? So from a Buddhistic point of view, helpful would mean that the communication contributed somehow to our own and the other person's growth, to their development, to our development, to us being able to take more responsibility for ourselves in life, to our sort of practical and spiritual welfare. It all sounds a bit grand, really. But we're talking about some sort of very down-to-earth communications, as well as maybe something the Buddha said, which, you know, sort of utterly transformed a person's life. Yeah, so feedback is quite a sort of area. So in this actual difficult situation about a patient, let's call him Bill, which was all crumbling around me. Anyway, I won't bother with it all, but actually my consultant was away. The junior doctor seemed to be unwilling to get involved in the situation. I felt sort of landed on. I was landed on, really. But I suddenly became very stressed and I started sort of talking very fast and sort of panicking. And I think I was being a bit, it didn't happen so fast, but I think I was being a bit sort of, I can't think of the right word, but sort of a bit dismissive of them or something. I think because actually I was annoyed or also, you know, stressed somewhere, but by the way, he didn't seem to be wanting to get involved. Anyway, then the junior doctor said very strongly, let's just calm down. And it had an immediate effect on me, actually, because I was suddenly sort of realized what I was doing, and I was able to calm down, and then we carried on and we sorted it out. So not all feedback is helpful, though, is it? Sometimes it does seem to be destructive and unhelpfully sort of judgmental and critical. We've probably all been on the receiving end of that in our life. Again, let's just have a few words, just have a little reflection. Actually, we'll have just a couple of minutes in our own minds. You know, think of a time when actually you were on the receiving end of some helpful communication. You know, what were the sort of features that maybe led it to be helpful? And it might have been what the person said, so that was important the way the doctor said it. Let's just calm down, right? But also maybe there's how, you know, what sort of state were you in, or what was the environment like and so on. Just have a little think about that for a moment. So any thoughts from anybody about an experience of helpful communication in a way, what any conditions that sort of contributed to it being helpful?
Well, I attended this writing workshop on Saturday. Annalyn was there too. I think we both enjoyed it because Yeah, like we got quite direct feedback on our writing, not so much because she was writing in Dutch. Right? Yeah, but yeah, we were pointed out features of our writing individually, which I think have helped sort of write in other contexts as well.
So it was helpful because partly because you're saying because it related particularly to you and paid attention to you as an individual.
Yeah. I mean, writing is a very individual and authentic, perhaps.
Yes, but it wasn't a generalized thing. It was something individual to you. Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, lovely example there. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah. Yeah, let's hear the Zoomy ones.
The speaker's kindly and understanding intention, timely and appropriate, but felt listened by the other person, which lead to being more connected.
Just hang on, Vinay, I didn't quite get it. Anyway, it's timely and appropriate.
Yeah.
So it was timely, meaning it was coming at an appropriate time, isn't it? Yeah. And the first one was, just say it again. Oh, kindly intention.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you felt the person felt the kindly intention of the person giving you feedback. Yeah. And just the last one, I didn't quite get.
That's not last, but felt listened to by the other person, which led to being more connected.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Lovely.
Quiet location, thoughtful time to reflect.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And the last one, knowing that the person communicating had my welfare at his heart.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Lovely. Yeah. Really great. These sort of things are mentioned by the Buddha actually about, you know, there's a whole suit, well, there's many suttas where he sort of discusses communication. One of them is that he's asked by somebody actually, do you always speak the truth? And he says, well, yes. However, there's some sort of things with that. If it wasn't quite the right time for someone to hear the truth, you know, I might not speak at that moment. And if maybe the truth could be the truth, but if it wasn't actually going to conduce to their welfare, it wasn't really going to help them grow, I might not say something at that time. And he goes through a whole lot of things anyway. Anybody else want to make a comment on conditions, if you like, that are about helpfulness?
I was remembering being on a course. It was a teaching course, and feedback was sort of expected. That if you do something, you would be expected to receive some feedback. So the conditions were set up so that the feedback was not unexpected. But also the feedback I found very helpful was basically for somebody who was very appreciative as well. So the person who gave feedback, yes, the underlying tone was one of appreciation, but there was something which could be improved. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So you trusted them as well as helping, isn't it? And you could hear what they had to say, and really take it in. Yeah. Just another one over here.
I think it would be more of a gesture when you're having a really long day and you come back and there are dishes to do, for example, and just looking at your body language, your partner understands that, you know, you're not able to do the dishes, and if they help to do the dishes, I feel that also would fall in like helpful communication. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, that's that helpfulness can also, it's a bit like it's something we sort of aspire to as Buddhists, just doing what's needed, isn't it? Just like you said, what's actually needed in that situation? Well, the other person sees you're tired or something and just does it. Yeah. So a lot of that sort of, in a way, silent, trusting communication is going on. Yeah. Yeah, the only thing I want to mention is that point about maybe helpful is sort of, you know, opening up a new perspective on the situation or something like that, perhaps. There's lots of things we could say about unhelpful, which we haven't got time to go into. I'm sure you can think of lots of examples where, you know, we've had some sort of feedback which has not been helpful, perhaps because it's been patronizing or destructively critical, ill-informed, somebody's impatient or something like that. So lastly, we have harmonious communication or harmonizing communication. And that's the positive, that's the skillful. And what we try to avoid engaging in is slanderous communication. I don't do slander, do I? Well, I just gave you a little slight example of when I sort of got a bit of a kick in some way by saying I'd been rapped on the knuckles. Just sort of, there was a sort of way in which I felt hurt by that, but then I was kind of turning it into something in which I almost got a bit of a pleasure out of putting that other person down. Do you understand? So basically it means not engaging in gossip. As the Buddha put it, you know, she does not repeat there what she has heard here, so as to cause dissension. But, you know, there are many ways in which communications can be disharmonious, such as gestures, face pulling, eyebrow raising, you know, behind somebody's back. The subtle sort of adult version of what children often do in a kind of more obvious way. And in the modern world, the whole field of social media, the way that messages can be replicated, passed on, added to, and so on, I think that's something we all need to kind of, you know, look at in the light of the precepts. And as I said, it is a bit challenging. Well, I didn't say this, I'm adding this, but it's the same point. I think it can be a bit challenging to acknowledge that, well, you know, we are wonderful people, aren't we? But we can get a bit of pleasure out of disharmony. This is what it's meant. This is what malice means. When we get a bit of a kick out of disharmony or putting somebody down in some sort of way, or because if we put somebody down, we imagine we're putting ourselves up, aren't we? This kind of thing, seeing other people squirm. And the Buddha talked about the way that people living a spiritual life would naturally be very keen on harmony between people. In fact, passionate about harmony. This is how he talked about it, that I'm passionate about harmony. And he encouraged his disciples at that time to be passionate about harmony. And harmony, you know, this is the kind of communication that brings people together, that fosters greater understanding, helps deeper connectedness. Perhaps it's the highest kind of human communication that there is. And to engage in harmonious or harmonizing communication is to forget your narrow personal concerns and sort of work towards a kind of greater collective good. So it is very important to see that harmony doesn't mean simply agreeing on everything, or it doesn't imply that we've got to be agreeing on everything together. We're not trying to achieve a false unity with harmony, but a genuine unitedness. And this needs us to be quite sort of bold and brave as individuals who are aware of ourselves, and we're not afraid of putting over our thoughts and feelings and views. We're not dominated by approval seeking, for instance, which prevents us being ourselves in situations, but we're also concerned for others, giving space for others to speak and to have their own views. So only then can individuals, us, communicate and work together for greater harmony, or towards greater harmony. Ultimately, maybe there is a real meeting of minds where the barriers dividing self and others start to break down, and genuine collective action in body, speech, and mind then maybe comes about. And perhaps at times, one of the sort of natural outcomes of deep harmony, which you may experience sometimes on a retreat, for instance, is a beautiful shared silence. So you might want to look in groups and have you experienced anything like this? And, you know, what do we know about unharmonious communications? So we're going to go into discussion groups, and we've got about 20 minutes, and we can talk about any aspect of communication that we want to. But in a way, what we want to do, hopefully some of it is, you know, look at our strengths. What are our strengths in terms of how we communicate? Maybe that fits with one or other of the precepts. In what ways are we already being skillful? And we might be able to sort of see how we could build on those strengths, or build up the strengths, perhaps of an area where we're not so strong. But also we might want to look at some areas of weakness. There might be some aspects of unskillful communication we want to talk about, or even discuss about, well, we do something, but is it unskillful? Might want to examine that. And how might we sort of act to change that unskillful kind of communication that we're engaging in.